All right, people, what's up? This is another episode of Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Tonight's episode, gender roles, switching roles, and role play. Pat, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. You know, winter's in full effect, but
Ooh.
so is Fun and Truth. So
That's right.
let's do it.
It's Fun and Truth and hot and cold.
Yeah, lots of cold, man. Get your thermals up.
All right, so gender roles, switching roles, role play. What are we talking about here?
What we're talking about is men and women and how they view themselves in the context of relationships. So there's a lot of legs to this. We'll start with this. It's been said that men are judged by their status in life, and women are judged by how they look or who they're with.
Which is also a form of status.
Correct.
Yeah.
But just in layman's terms, a man and a woman walk into a room, the men are looking at her like, look at her figure, you know, how good does she look? Or who's the dude she walked in with?
Right.
But again, this theory supposes that the man walks in and women are immediately checking for his status. Then there are status symbols, right?
Yeah.
Like what you're driving, what watch is on your arm, you know, what kind of suit or whatever clothing you're wearing. Something that gives off, something that evokes, well, this is my status in life.
Right.
Like there are men that cannot get a girl's attention, but if they reach for a straw at the bar and their presidential Rolex slides down, suddenly that same girl might speak to them because it's a status symbol. But when he tried to talk to her 5 minutes ago, she took a look at his buck teeth, his lazy eye, and his receding hairline, and she wasn't checking for
That's
him.
right. Yeah.
So I want to get your opinion on this. I think there's truth to that statement. It is true that a girl who, let's say, is unemployed, but hot, I mean smoking hot, it's truth that she can get any man wait as she's waiting for the bus,
Yep.
simply because she's that hot.
Right.
It's also true that the best looking dude in the world, you know, he can get attention from women waiting for that bus unemployed. But no woman is really taking him seriously.
Mm-hmm.
She might look at him like a piece of meat. But the mere fact that he can't provide, it's like, well, so that's true. However, let me give you a scenario. Let's say you see a girl that you dealt with. Let's say a man sees a girl that he slept with 15 years ago, right? And she was hot when he slept with her. Now she's not hot. And he thinks to himself, well, you know what? Look at her now. She doesn't look good. I'm not even going to speak to her, right? Because she's not hot. I'm not going to claim her.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And this guy's thinking is, well, please, I'm a partner in my law firm. I'm not going to go talk to her. She doesn't look good anymore.
Right.
Right? But
she makes me look bad for having had any type of relationship
right.
with her.
But on the flip side, he's presupposing that she's into his status. The thing is, unless she's following him online, she has no idea what his status is.
If I can interject for a second. Obviously, I think there are two things to this. Number one is the fact that it's a superficial argument or a superficial observation that is legitimate. There are a lot of people, we have a very simple term called gold diggers. And it can be men and women. I think where the difference between men and women really exists is that the narcissism of men who are focused on their status in order to be able to accumulate possessions, women, things. They are basically looking at the world as something that is filled with all sorts of items that they can collect for their trophy case, for their history books, whatever it is. For women, they are looking at the opportunity of men of status as a way to be able to better themselves, to make their friends, family jealous or, impressed with who they are. And in general, both people are basically filling a void with a very superficial, ineffective objective in terms of how they're pursuing this role.
Yeah, very well put. And I think what happens is people don't ever consider the other side.
Right.
And a lot of that is based on what we believe and what we know to be true. And here's what I mean. So take the whole notion, like what you just articulated very well, the whole notion of, men acquire status to acquire things.
Right.
And in some cases, they view women as these same type of things or trophies, right?
Right.
And some women, similarly, are like, they want to be owned, so to speak, or they want to be possessed and taken care of, so to speak. Right. So that goes hand in hand. So a guy who has met all these women that fit that mold, when he comes across a woman that doesn't, he has no idea how to deal with her. Right. And the thing is, it's very real. Like, I'm not going to say that there's more women like that than not, but there are legions, millions of women who can take care of themselves. Right. Like, very well. Like, fly around the world.
Yeah.
Not just like they can feed themselves. Okay?
Right.
And these women, if they meet a guy at first, when they first meet him without knowing anything about him, believe it or not, they want to see how you're going to treat them.
Right. How you're going to speak to them.
Yeah, not what you're going to buy them.
Yes.
Now, so let's say you treat them fine and what have you, and now you're having a good time. Along the way, she may begin to shift. It may shift to, do I want to sleep with them? That might happen quickly. But further down the line, it might shift to, can we be something together?
Right.
Now at that point, your status can be helpful because it's like, the two of us together can accomplish great things. But understand, in the beginning, she couldn't care less. Only because, not that she couldn't care less, let me change that, but on the priorities, that wasn't at the top of the list.
Right, right.
And then furthermore, there's women that if you've been with them in the past, when they see you, they might have forgot they slept with you. Like, the furthest thing from their mind could be so again. So that, and what this leads me into is, actually we'll get into it later in the episode, but there's cockiness and there's arrogance.
Yes.
There's a big difference. But let's stick with this. So we have gender roles, switching roles, and role play.
Roles on you right now. So I'm going to throw a curveball at you and bring race into this, because one of the interesting things is how interracial couples, and we're not just talking about black and white here. It can be, a mix of Asian and, black or white. It could be Latino and Asian. It could be Latino and black, Latino and white.
Any combination.
Any combination. The interesting thing here is now how people look at the person in their own, racial group differently when they date somebody outside their race, because that person treated them better or genuinely had an interest in them where their own people did not.
And then not only that, it's how you look at the two different genders from your race.
That's correct.
I'm a black man, so I can speak on this. A lot of times when a black man is dating a white woman, one of the initial things that'll be said in a gym, in a barbershop, in a room of all black people. This is not always stated. Something that I've heard over the years is the immediate assumption is black women are difficult and white women are passive.
Mm-hmm.
Black women can be loud and argumentative, and white women eat shit, basically.
Right.
I think that's stupid, but I'm just telling you broad strokes of what I've heard. Now, when a black woman dates a white man, it can go one of two ways. Black women seem to get intrigued. Because it's like, oh, he can satisfy her. I want him. You know, what's he have? You know, there must be a reason why she's not with the brothers and she's with this guy.
Right.
But it also, black males might look at her like, well, I wonder how many brothers did her dirty.
Right.
That she went to the other side.
Yeah.
No one ever considers that she just fell in love with the dude.
Right.
And no one considers that
There was a natural attraction.
that on the other side, like the black guy just fell in love with this white girl.
Right. There's natural attraction in both cases.
When I say no one ever considers, I'm exaggerating. People consider it, but just I'm talking about the general things that we hear.
Right.
Now, and I'm only speaking from the rooms I've been in. Jay, can you tell me the opposite? So when you're, for the sake of this conversation, running truth in black and white,
Sure.
let's just not speak about the other combinations right now.
Sure.
And
Sure.
give me the same, like when you've been in the room with your white counterparts in the same situations that I just spoken about. What have
Right.
you heard?
Right. So I think that it's very similar. You know, I think that the only difference is that oftentimes when you are around a number of, you know, white males and one of them decides to date a woman of color, the interest level of all the other men is skewed between how you're going to be judged versus what you're going to have to handle with in terms of the challenges of, you know, her family and the cultural differences. So there's a lot of curiosity in terms of, you know, what are you getting yourself into from, you know, the bigger perspective of, hey, if, you know, you guys get serious, there's a lot of things you're going to have to deal with. I think when it comes to white women, how white women look at other, you know, look at a white woman who dates outside of her race, and also white men who look at a white woman who dates outside of their race. Believe it or not, they're much more, in general, open to it, simply because I think that they're freeing their minds, number one. But number two, there is a sense that, I don't want to call it entitlement, but it's a level of privilege that she has the freedom to explore.
Okay, interesting. Now, let me just say this. So the thing about stereotypes is they're true.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're positive. I'm saying they come from somewhere.
Right.
Okay?
There's a basis for them. There's
So,
a foundation.
I'm a very punctual person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm black. I've heard jokes my whole life about I'm not on CP time.
Right.
I'm not only black, I'm Caribbean.
Right.
I've heard jokes, how are you always on time? You're Haitian.
Right.
So, but it comes from people having dealt with people of Caribbean descent who are late all the time. So
a significant number.
So there's a point where you have to be able to laugh at yourself.
Right.
And not take things too seriously. And there's a point where, you know, if somebody crosses the line, you have to know when to check them. So I digress, but I say that to say this notion of, weak black males going to find some subservient woman who happened to be white. It has happened, because if it didn't happen, no one could create the stereotype.
Right.
Right? This notion of a black woman dealing with some deadbeat black guys and getting to a point where she literally says, I'm not dating any more black guys. I'm gonna try white guys. That has happened. So these reputations, they come from somewhere.
Right.
Right. We're here to point out.
They're mostly hateration, but
but we're here to point out things that maybe people didn't consider.
Right.
So what you just said is interesting about the sense of, for lack of a better word, of privilege.
Right.
Or the feeling of I can kind of explore and do what I want. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And again, you can't speak for your entire race, but I have a white friend who was dating a black girl very seriously for a black woman very seriously for many, many years. Matter of fact, when he began dating her, she was a girl. Mm-hmm. She grew to be a woman. They ended up getting married. And one thing that he faced, he was experiencing a lot of lewd comments.
Right.
From his white friends.
Right.
That he found very offensive.
Right.
Like they didn't take his relationship seriously. They took it as him exploring.
Right, jungle fever, and also
right, and it bothered him because he wanted them to be happy for him.
Right.
But meanwhile, they were like, you named the joke.
To a certain degree, not only do I understand that, I lived it. Interracial dating in the late '80s, early '90s was taboo. Jungle Fever came out, I think, in the early '90s, and I had already started, dating, women of color, and there was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot of making fun of because people didn't know. They didn't have any experience, so therefore they were just like, ooh, you're just exploring, you're just checking out what the other side is like. And, my attitude towards it was like, and what's wrong with that, number one. But number two was that, hey, if I like the person and we get along, to take this a little bit further, in terms of role play, and this is really for our listeners to think about, is the fact of you can't understand another person's perspective unless you put yourself in their shoes and try to, act like someone or try to, see somebody else's, perspective in terms of this particular, argument. What I find about it is that we started with gold diggers and now we're, completely on the other side of, where people get misjudged based on who they date. But both of them are kind of similar arguments and issues, if you want to observe it, from the standpoint that a person who is looking at somebody for their status may be interested in them for more than their status, but they're looking at them on a surface level because, again, they have an idea in mind of what they want, what they're attracted to.
The funny thing about roles and how it differs from being a gold digger is that people just find success attractive.
Yeah.
Like a gold digger is looking to use someone.
Correct.
But someone who is looking for someone that's successful may not want anything from them. They just don't want to be with somebody who's a liability.
That's exactly right.
Like, if you're a woman and you worked really, really hard to get where you are, or even if you're a woman and you inherited your wealth, whatever, you still have a right to not want to be with someone who's a liability that you have to take care of.
Yep.
Like, even if you have more than them, you'll feel better knowing that they're bringing something to the table.
Yep.
That they can float on their own. They can stand on their own 2 feet.
All right. On that note, we're going to take our first break. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay. Stay with us. All right. We're back.
Jay, before we get into another angle of gender roles, switching roles, and role play, or all the above, which can be interesting. Before we do that, since we touched on race, let me ask you. You opened up about interracial dating in your own life. When you did that, we talked about different reactions from our counterparts or even onlookers. But for you specifically, have you had any experience, or can you share your experience on how white women of your own race, reacted to your dating outside of your race?
Sure. It's interesting. The first word I'm going to use is intimidation. There was a significant amount of intimidation and, to a certain extent, backlash of jealousy in the fact that I had, chosen to date a woman of color. And this was brought to my attention well after the fact. Believe it or not, it was both black and white women. And it was very, very, fascinating, because the white women who were intimidated and jealous were sort of shocked that I had never asked any of them out on a date first before I asked this one woman of color. But the other women of color were telling the girl I was dating that she shouldn't date me because I was white, and that, it's only going to end badly. And it was one of those things where these girls were my friends up until that point. And then suddenly it was like, okay, well, what's wrong with me? And so I confronted a couple of them, and this is going way back to high school. So, but over the years, it's been similar, sort of, I've noticed going into a restaurant or a movie theater or a Broadway show or anything else, if I'm with my significant other, and she's a woman of color, people look at us differently. They always have. And the difference now, to me, is that there's a level of appreciation that has replaced the level of audacity that people think I have. There are still some people that think that I'm pretty audacious, but it is something that has slowly changed.
So, the word intimidation,
Yeah.
and or jealous, was it shock in your estimation? Was it shock? Or maybe you don't have to estimate. Maybe they articulated specifically, but was it shock, or was it that they wanted to be with you, or was it just natural competition, like why her and not us, or were they, with the word intimidation, were they intimidated by the black girl herself?
It's a good question. I could say that any one of those is possible. I would definitely say that there was definitely the natural competition. So a lot of these girls that were like, he never asked me out on a date, why not? It's like, well, number one, because I know you would have said no. It wasn't until I was dating a woman of color that you even noticed me. But number two is the fact that a lot of these women I wasn't interested in. And part of it was that, it's high school. They've dated other guys that I thought were poor choices, and so I just wasn't going down that road with them.
I got to jump in. We have to do an episode on the fact that every guy your girl dated is a cornball.
Right. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Every man views the crop of dudes you dated.
Well, not only that, but
cornball.
But you have to realize, and this is for our female listeners out there, that, men of any self-worth they're going to look at who you have dated in the past.
Facts.
And they're going to make a decision. Do I want to spend my time with you based on the choices that you've made in the past? Because if you've selected some really worthless guys or some very, very arrogant SOBs or, just negative.
We're gonna have fun with that.
The reality is that I'm now looking at you and saying, well, if these are the choices you're making, I don't want any part of that.
I definitely want to get back to gender roles, switching roles, and role play.
Yeah.
But I have to, race doesn't really come up that often, and in this show, this platform, and since it came up, let's go with it a little bit. Now, for the progression.
Yeah.
Is it based on people's level of education?
Mm-hmm.
Is it based on the fact that today, almost everybody's mixed racially?
Right.
Like what I mean is, almost everyone if you go to like a family dinner.
Right. There's some collection of people that
right.
are not.
Or is it just the world has progressed together? Like I'm wondering, when you say things have gotten better, because for a person who has been in interracial relationships, when you go out, not just you personally, but when people go out and you begin to feel different energy, and it's better energy than you felt in yesteryear.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a feeling that we can't ignore. So things must be getting better.
Yeah,
but I'm wondering what's causing things to get better.
So first of all, when I started dating, getting into interracial relationships, I was the only one. And, I have this great story about the fact that I went down to South Carolina with my girlfriend at the time, who was from South Carolina. And we went into a Waffle House, and they wouldn't serve us because we were an interracial couple. And that was my first experience with real racism. Now, this is in the early 1990s. If I go down to South Carolina now, I'm sure that is not going to happen. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that there are just so many more interracial couples. So everywhere you go, there is an interracial couple now. Now, they may not be the majority, but they are certainly a preference. And, people like Tiger Woods really made it, and validated it, when he came up with his whole Cablination. So, there is a significant population now of interracial children that may be adults. I mean, Tiger's almost the same age that I am. So, all of these, people now validate that there is a mixture that exists.
Because we discuss a lot of real world and real relationship subjects, and love and sex is like a universal language, a lot of things get overlapped into our conversations, and we try to compartmentalize and have separate. One of the reasons why we're launching a different show in 2020 is for that very reason. We try to stay on topic.
Yeah.
But the Coblasian comment, or maybe Coblinasian, I forgot how you actually pronounced it. I got to tell you, amongst black people, and I don't speak for my entire race, because despite what people might think, we all think independently, right? Like we don't all think the same thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, no one, well, you know what? Speaking for myself, I never wanted him to denounce any part of his heritage.
Yeah.
Because that's crazy, right? You are what you're made up of.
Right.
But what I wanted him to acknowledge or to be aware of, and maybe he is.
Yeah.
I never sat down with him, is the fact that if slavery were reinstituted tomorrow,
yeah,
which side would he be on? He'd either be in the field or in the house, but he'd be a slave.
Right.
So, would you have to? I'm not mixed.
Right.
Okay. But if I were mixed, or if I would one day have a mixed child, or if I was giving advice to a mixed person, what I would tell that person is, this nation, in the fabric of the nation, is racism.
Yeah.
So, like,
Now bring that back to gender roles.
Oh,
and
I'm going to tie it in, but I was
yeah.
going to say, like, when he's made that comment, it's not that anybody wanted him to denounce being part Korean. If
Yeah.
I'm quoting that correctly, I think I'm right about
Yeah.
that. But it's like, we want you to acknowledge that
You're a person. of
if
color.
you had on a fitted hat really low
Yeah.
and you borrowed my car instead of having your driver drive you around,
Right.
and you go out into the street and someone doesn't recognize who you are,
Oh, your ass is getting pulled over.
no one's figuring out what percentage of your blood is Korean, bro.
Right.
They're going in, and then as we see, the second the media had some dirt on Tiger Woods,
Yeah.
he wasn't treated Korean like he was Korean.
No. The sharks came out.
So like I'm just saying, like, so and that bothered me too, because all these males were sitting on Sports Center, right, and
Right.
NBC and CNN, and I don't know anybody's personal business, but I know one thing: if I had $3 million to bet, all those men talking about him cheating on his wife,
Right.
they're not all faithful at home,
Right.
but they were acting like he committed murder.
Right.
People got so judgmental, and I believe the vitriol he faced
Now,
primarily because
not
he was
only that,
black.
But I'll agree with you. Let me jump in. Is the fact that Tiger Woods was taken down long before the Me Too movement for the fact that he was fucking a whole bunch of women in different states and cities around the country because he was Tiger Woods, right? Now, the reason why this was such a big news story is because he was the best golf player in the world, and he happened to be black. Visually.
Ask me what Tiger Woods really guilty of, or what was he really guilty of? Ask me that question.
What was he really guilty of?
Not having any damn game. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
If you were worth $6 billion,
Yeah.
and you're committing adultery,
Yeah.
you're making your own phone calls, like
Yeah.
your hoes or whatever. You're calling them yourself,
Right.
with your voice,
Yeah.
saying things like, "Hey, this is Tiger, call me back."
Yeah.
Like, you got he was worth $6 billion. Like, the resources he had at his disposal.
Right.
He's guilty of having no damn game.
Yeah.
That's what he's. Okay,
Agreed.
let's go back. Let's
Agreed.
go back. All right.
But getting back to, I think, the bigger picture of, with gender roles and also race and really switching roles, with these two things is that, when you look at how people judge each other, getting into, the idea of relationships, even though there are more interracial couples now than, any time in the past, it's still a challenge. And it's one of those things where people still look at status and they still think about things from, well, I don't want to have a mixed baby. Or if I decide to get into a relationship with that person, even though she's attractive, so she could be a jump off, but she can't be my real girl. She could be my side piece, but she can't be my real girl. She could be my mistress, but she can't be my real girl. So it's something where there still exists, both in terms of gender, and understand we're speaking from a male perspective here, and we're saying that these are how guys think. What about women if they think this way? How many women, white women, black women, Asian women, Latino women, it doesn't matter. Look at some other man outside their race as something that they could have on the side, but not something that they could have as their main committed relationship.
So just to narrow it back down to like just gender roles, switching roles, and role play. Okay. So we talked about the race, and
Yeah.
we started off talking about status,
Yeah.
right? So I try to avoid being very repetitive, like redundant. But one thing that's been a common theme through our podcast is at the various episodes are getting in where you fit in,
Right.
or finding your niche market or what's best for you. And here's what I mean by that. Let's talk about the race. We started with status. Let's talk about status first. So with status, if your mentality is the more I acquire, the fancier car I drive, the bigger title on my business card, the more important I am, and that will determine what kind of person I end up with. Let's say that's what you believe.
Yeah.
Even if it's not what I believe. There's nothing wrong with that. And the reality is there's a whole legion of people that agree with you.
Right.
Of the gender that you're into. Like if you're heterosexual, there's women like that. If you're homosexual, there's men like that. So if you're the type of person that is all about, well, are you good to me? Personality, do we mesh well? And if you happen to be doing well in life, so be it. That's great. That kind of person. There's a legion of people that believe in that. If you date outside of your race, there are entire neighborhoods, cities, towns, states, segments of the population, countries where that is so common, no one looks at you remotely funny.
Right, and there are other parts where it's
It's still
unacceptable.
there's parts of this very country where there's everything from Confederate flags to places that won't serve you, and you better not be out at a certain time of night if you're the wrong complexion, right? So my point is, there's 327 approximately million people in the United States of America right now.
Okay.
7.5 billion worldwide. Get in where you fit in. My point is, no matter where in these categories your mentality fits. I'm not sitting here saying that if you're all about status that you should change that.
Right.
I'm not sitting here saying that if you're not about status you should change that or anything about race. I'm saying whatever it is you want, it's out there.
Right.
And no one can judge you. I personally don't give a damn. But if you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable, you can actually find a situation where you're extremely comfortable.
Right.
And we're not even talking about the most obscure or bizarre things.
Right.
Like, because we can even do a whole show on fetishes. Like, if you want somebody to defecate you, there's a legion of people that'll do that. Like,
let me
literally
jump in on
whatever
that.
you want, it's out
Because
there.
again, what we're talking about in terms of gender roles, switching roles, and role play is that this is where you have an opportunity within the relationship, and this is now I'm going to get away from, it doesn't matter whether it's interracial. It actually doesn't matter whether it's heterosexual. This is where we get into whoever your partner is. You have an opportunity to create a relationship with a person that is completely different than anything that you've experienced based on your willingness to switch roles and role play, based on things that you may or may not be comfortable with. But by bringing them to the surface, by bringing them to each other's attention, now you have an opportunity to talk about these things. Now, let's use a lesbian relationship for an example. There's this idea that one person has to be the butch, masculine, and the other person has to be much softer and submissive. Again, I am only speaking from observation, but this is a stereotype that, again, the two people in the relationship, if they're role playing, can develop and grow their relationship based on how they change their positions and also how they use external influences.
Change positions, pun intended.
You got it.
All right. Great point you make there.
Yeah.
So we're talking about some things that people say amongst their peer group as they observe others in their peer group doing something.
Right.
Right? We also talked about how some people, what comments they might make about someone not in their peer group, but amongst their peer group,
right,
about what that person is doing. You want to hear something that I've heard guys say?
Hit me with it.
When a woman is a lesbian, and let's say she's a very feminine looking, attractive woman, and she dates, I don't even know if the word butch is appropriate, but I've heard the term butch, I've heard the term AG. I'm careful because I don't know what the right lingo is, but she dates a woman that looks like a typical man. Like
right.
Her hairstyle, her style of dress, down to the way she carries herself and walks. Maybe even the way she speaks. So a lot of dudes have sat around. I've been in these conversations where they're like, yo, if you like girls, why wouldn't you get a girl that looks like a girl?
Right.
Like, if you like girls, why does your man have a nicer sweats than me?
Right.
A fresher haircut than me, a nicer
Right.
goatee than me?
Right.
Now, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Of course I don't. How would I? But strictly based on logic, and I guess the right thing to do is to ask lesbians. Take a poll, bring some lesbians on the show. But just based on logic alone, those comments strike me as ignorant.
Yeah.
Because you're not a lesbian, so how can you possibly rationalize what they're thinking or looking for?
Right, you're looking just at the superficial
Right, because
and saying...
maybe they're choosing their mates the same way you choose your mate, prick. Like,
Right.
for the same things we just talked about. It could be
Yeah.
status, how they treat you. Like, the same things that we were just talking about with heterosexual relationships, they could be thinking the same thing. But dudes are like, this chick is bad.
Right.
She's turning me down.
Right.
She's
But
gonna get
going for that,
because a lot of it too. When they want to imagine that girl with her girlfriend, they're imagining it for their own pleasure.
Right.
So they want to imagine what they see in porn. They want to imagine two
course.
hot chicks. So when this girl is dealing with this dude with the broad shoulder, with this chick with the broad dude shoulders,
Right.
the guy is sitting
Might as well
around.
call her a dude.
Right, the guy's sitting around like, damn, she's gonna diss me or us
That's right.
and go rock with her.
That's right.
So again, but if you think about it, in that it's self-serving, right?
We're gonna take a break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about why variety is the spice of life. All right, we're back. This is Fun and Truth in Black and White with Pat and Jay, and tonight's episode is gender roles, switching roles, and role play. Pat, you know, something I learned a long time ago that's very important for people to understand is that variety is the spice of life, and when you suffer a breakup, or you just decide to, part ways with whoever you're with, you have a golden opportunity to experience something completely different. And this is something that most people have a problem with. In fact, lots of people are judged when they do something completely different. For example, interracial dating. Or if you date a very, very, attractive, buxom woman, and you decide to date a massive, massively large woman, or a very skinny girl. The judgment that's being put on you is really based on exactly what you said right before our break. About in their own mind, the person who's judging you is thinking about it from their perspective of, could they be in your shoes and do what you're doing? And the answer is 90% of the time, probably not. You know why? Because they don't have the courage to go out there and do it. What do you think?
That's a great point. And I think that, so to not make the same point, I'll make an alternative point. A lot of times, they have put you in a category. So people feel comfortable when you do what they think you should do. Right? Like somebody famous, like when Jay-Z first started dating Beyonce. Like Chris Rock had a joke on one of his stand-up. He said Jay-Z dating Beyonce is like finding out Bentleys were on sale last week for $20,000. Because the joke is, on the scale of men, he's not attractive. On the scale of women, she's extremely attractive. But it's a joke, right? But people have a preconceived notion of who they felt she should have been with,
right?
Or who he should have been with, right? So bring it down to like people day to day, right? People, I think, if they know the person, they may or may not be interested in you, and you may or may not have dealt with them. Whatever the case, if they know you, they have an idea of who you should be with.
Right.
So there's this guy that slept with everybody in high school and college, right? Doing his thing. that he kind of slept with these wild party girls. He settles down, and it's the librarian chick, right?
Mm-hmm.
That might be wild and crazy for all you know, but you don't look at her that way.
Right. Right.
So you're like, you married her,
Yeah.
right? Or well, that's just one example. So to your point, it could be about people lacking the courage to do what it is the other person's doing, but it could also be about their preconceived notion on what that person should be doing.
Right. That's a great point. You know, the other thing about, you know, variety and being the spice of life is the fact that it also gives you perspective. So let's say that you suffered a traumatic breakup with your last partner, and you think you know what you want in your next partner. Sometimes going for the exact opposite or something that's completely left of what you think you want takes you somewhere even better, because you now are getting to know somebody based on not the qualities you're looking for in them, but the qualities they present to you that, you know, really make you interested in this person in a completely different way.
Switching roles,
Yeah.
role play, gender roles. I think when you come out of a relationship, whether it's a bad breakup, cool, amicable breakup, what have you, I think it's good to go into a new one like, I'm never letting another person put their hands on me, or I'm never letting another person speak to me a certain way, or I'm never going to be with someone again who takes and doesn't give. Like, it's good to have learned from relationships and then go into a new one with the open, you know, with those things in mind. But I think it's also important to have an open mind.
Right. Yes.
Because if you're too closed-minded, you may be denying yourself the opportunity to experience something different that might be actually good for you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're talking about variety is the spice of life. We started with an example that I gave about claiming or not claiming. What are your thoughts on just the notion of people not claiming who they were with, or claiming who they were with, or their criteria on how they decide who to claim and not claim?
Right. So when you say claim, you're saying basically, you know,
Admit,
people that
admit I was with her. I was
you
with him.
acknowledge that you
Acknowledge, right?
slept, you know, with a person, even if they have changed, and you look at them differently in terms of, you know, the status of that person.
I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
because the whole claim and not claim thing could be, look at them now, they look horrible. Or it could be that when you were with the person, you were cheating on the person you're with now.
Right.
So you don't claim it because you just don't want to get busted.
Right.
It could be that you slept with that person on a drunk one-night stand.
Right.
So just, you know, so how do you feel about claiming or not claiming for the various reasons?
Well, the most important thing is actually a quote from the Greek philosopher Plutarch: "To thine own self be true." And you know, that's the first most important thing, is that you got to be honest with yourself about what you have or have not done. In terms of acknowledging it to other people, I mean, again, that's your business. You know, if you don't want to tell anybody, you know, your business, I think you're smarter off. But if you're going to share with people, then you're best off not finagling the numbers too much, because you never know how it's going to, you know, play out against you, number one. But number two is the fact that I think that what you were originally talking about, and again, from a status standpoint, is that, you know, oftentimes when you do something that you look back on as a mistake, or I don't know what I was thinking at the time, you tend to erase that, not because you did anything wrong, because you're human, you're meant to make mistakes. That's the thing about it, is, but in your mind, there's a shame to the fact that you somehow ventured off the
You know what?
path.
That's a very good point, because you might be on the straight and narrow right now.
Yeah.
And the not claiming has nothing to do with that other person. it could be because you're ashamed with that era in your life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I knew a girl when I was in school. Her first semester, she was a full-time student, and by the end of the semester, she had more partners than she had credits.
Wow.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, so, you know, if that woman, you know, now is married and is walking with her husband or what have you, and she looks back at her old self like, damn, I'm ashamed of that.
Yeah.
She may not be claiming that person that she sees, not because of anything going with her, with the
Yeah.
other person, but she's looking at herself like, I can't believe I did that shit.
Right.
Like, you know,
Exactly.
what was I thinking? So,
Exactly.
you know, so the whole gender roles, and I guess racial roles,
Mm-hmm.
right? Switching roles and role play.
Yep.
You know, it's like if you're looking at roles in using the analogy of like a stage play
Yeah.
or a movie. In your life, you're basically playing different characters, you know, or different versions, different
yeah.
roles, or if you look at it like an ongoing soap opera,
Yeah.
you know, you have a trajectory and a journey, and you're going along that way. And none of the stages are there anything wrong with it. It's
Right.
kind of like where you are now and how you feel about what you did yesterday and how you're going to feel about what you did tomorrow. But the best advice is probably what you call your segment, which is to not give a fuck. Like, kind of like just
Yeah.
do you.
That's right. That's right. You know, tell you what, we're going to take a break. We'll come back with those last segments, but I want to use the word progress. We'll leave it there.
We are back, people. Jay, buzzword, keyword, progress. Speak on it.
So, the opportunity with looking at roles, you know, switching roles, role play, you know, understanding, observing all of this, is the fact that throughout your life, being able to explore any one of these aspects of a relationship is where you find progress. Two people come together. When they first meet, whatever their superficial, you know, objectives are, they're replaced by their overall interest in the other person. And how the relationship is going to live or die is based on their ability to continue to progress. And that progression or progress is based on their willingness to switch roles, to role play with each other, to understand, you know, the gender roles that do and do not really exist within a relationship, and be able to push the boundaries on things. So that's my 2 cents on progress. Pat, I don't give a fuck about abortion laws that don't include repercussions for the father. And here's what I'm talking about. If you realize that right now in this country, every abortion law is about the mother and at what stage or term the pregnancy can be acceptably aborted, if at all. And if she does it outside of that term, the penalty to her. So nowhere in any of this is there any liability to the man that got her pregnant. She's on her own. And that's not a right law. Because it takes 2 people to make a baby, not 1. She may be carrying the child, but she is not wholly responsible for the creation of that child. And so therefore, if you are going to write a law in which you are preventing a woman to choose what to do with her body, the penalty must also include the father. That's my I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I think that's a great IDGAF because it's almost as if at its most fundamental, a bunch of people are sitting in a room, many of which are men, coming up with laws telling women what to do with their body.
That's
first of
exactly
all.
right.
So That in itself is asinine. And I don't care if you want to make it religious, scientific, it's asinine, it makes no sense. But then with the laws themselves, the way they are written, there's the one side where oftentimes men aren't even, their opinions or feelings on the child aren't even considered.
Right.
Which is also asinine. But then you make an excellent point that honestly, prior to just now, I've never heard made before. So I give you credit for that, which is if the laws are there and something is done outside of those laws, there's no penalties for the man either.
That's right.
So if men are standing up like we have rights too, then you can also have repercussions too.
They should have.
Well done, my man.
Thank you.
Earlier in this very episode, we talked about, I touched on the difference between being cocky and being arrogant. It is a very important distinction. I feel I'm cocky, and I think it's essential to be cocky. Cocky is you're not going to lay down for anybody. You understand your worth, and you're not going to allow anyone to belittle you or minimize your worth. And if someone is to do so, you will promptly put them in their place.
Yep.
Not necessarily with vulgarities. You don't have to be obscene. You don't have to fight. But depending on the situation, you might have to. But there is a correct way to check someone, or more properly placed, or put them in their place. So it's important to be cocky, because if you're not, there are those who will mistake how you're being for weakness. And that presents a whole other set of problems. And being arrogant, though, I have major issue with. You're not better than anybody. Now, when I say that, are you better than someone who rapes children? Of course. Mm-hmm. But don't compare yourself to vomit, right? Yeah. Like, that person's a piece of shit, right? So don't compare yourself to that person.
Agreed.
Right? But day to day, leaving these molesters aside, and you're not better than anybody else. You're regardless of anything you feel about yourself, physically, mentally, your job, where you live, your spouse, your family, your religion, whatever, no matter what designations you put on yourself, you're not better than anybody else.
Right.
You might be more capable. Like if someone is missing a limb, you're physically better off than them probably, but you're not better than them.
Right.
I cannot stand arrogant people, man, because there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who have been humbled, or those who will be humbled. Your day is going to come, and if people like your arrogant ass, those relationships will burst. I can guarantee it.
Right.
Okay? So there's a big distinction between being cocky and being arrogant, and it can become a fuzzy line. So make sure you're on the right side of that line, and if you're not, I guarantee you'll be put there at some point.
Yeah. I want to add on that what you really pointed out is the fact that it's knowing your value. And for someone who's cocky, they know their value, and they're letting other people know you are not going to tarnish my value.
Or reminding them if they forgot.
They're making sure. Arrogant people inflate their value. They tend to, see themselves as bigger than the situation and the people around them, or they make themselves that way because, again, for them, that's the way that they break down doors and get themselves into the right situations. So I think it's a very valid point, because understand that, there's an old saying, bullshit may get you to the top, but it won't keep you there. And the difference between cockiness and arrogance is a level of bullshit that you stink.
Well stated. Been another great episode. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the feedback from last week's episode. And next episode, we should be able to get into some of those emails
Yep.
that we received. Hope you had some fun, heard some truth, and you definitely heard some black and white today.
That's right. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on the next go round.
Peace and love.